listening to the Straight to Video Podcast with Rob Lane.
What's up and how's it going? As always, I'm your host Rob Lane and thanks for tuning in to the Straight to Video Podcast. First up, I want to thank you all for making the start of 2021 the best couple of months yet here on the show for both listens and downloads. The numbers really are looking great, so it's awesome to know that the podcast is reaching more and more people out there. On today's episode, I'm happy to welcome my friend Chuck Shute, who is the host of his own podcast based out in Arizona, USA, called, quite simply, the Chuck Shute Podcast. Both of our shows tread similar paths and we've had the occasional matching guests, so if you enjoy this show then please head on over and hear what Chuck is doing, as I'm sure you'll enjoy the talks he has there too. Chuck has a great interviewing style and really goes all in deep with his guests to get some great stories, and a lot of his shows have been picked up by the likes of huge music websites such as Sleaze Rocks and Blabbermouth, as he does such a great job of unearthing stuff you've not heard from his guests. What you're about to hear is simply a super fun chat with two guys who share a mutual love of music and bands, so if you're from a similar background then I'm sure you'll enjoy this. We talk about Chuck's teenage years in Seattle around the time of the huge 90s music movement, which potentially could have proven tough for an avid metal edge reader. We chat about his first concerts and then his eventual relocation from Seattle to his new home in Arizona and the launch of his successful podcasting adventure. If you want to find out more about Chuck's show, then simply search the Chuck Shute Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you can also find Chuck on Instagram at Chuck_Shute or on Facebook at Chuck Shute Podcast. Hope you all have fun listening and hopefully find another great podcast to add to your list. So here we go with my straight to video talk with Chuck Shute.
This is weird. Like I don't know. I haven't really seen you other than your cartoon picture. So you look good, man. You're young and you're healthy.
I don't know about young.
You're looking young. I don't know.
46.
Are you really 46? Dang, you don't look 46.
Yeah, hanging in there. I think it's because I've got no kids. I think that's the reason.
Oh yeah, I don't have any kids either. I think that helps us.
Well, congratulations on 100 episodes, dude.
Thank you.
That Paul Gargano one, I was hooked on that one this morning.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I like everything he's saying. He's like, oh yeah, this is what happened with Jerry Miller and all. And I'm just like, oh, what happened? Like,
I never knew the story.
I never knew. Yeah, I just remember I was a big Metal Edge fan as a kid, and then one day, like, it was like Paul Gargano is the new editor, and I was like, wait, what happened to Jerry Miller? And like, I didn't know. And then like he dropped off, and then the magazine kind of dropped off, and so yeah, I never really knew what happened. So it's kind of cool to hear that.
It sounds like he's one of those guests, like straight away, like this is going to be really easy. As long as I've got a few decent pointers for him, he's just going to roll with it.
Yeah, I heard him in a couple other interviews, and so I kind of knew that he was a great storyteller. I mean, because that's what he, did for so long, as he told stories via the magazine. So he knows like how to do good interviews and stuff like that, because he did so many of them.
It's great. I kind of lost track with Metal Edge a little bit in the mid-90s because it did start focusing more on heavier stuff.
Yeah, it started to turn into like Marilyn Manson, and that's kind of when I kind of dropped off. But then I would always kind of check every now and then to see if they had a new issue and if it had like the Warrant or something. And then, yeah, I didn't. So
I like the Metal Edge era where the covers always fell off.
Yeah.
That's the way I describe the eras.
Right.
Before they changed it. So you currently live out in Arizona, but you're from Seattle originally, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
How was it growing up there? Was you kind of like in the heart of the city, or is there like a suburban area?
No, yeah, I was like in the more suburban. It was a little town called Issaquah. It's about, I'd say like 25 minutes away from Seattle, but like in the traffic times, it's more like an hour away from Seattle because the traffic gets so bad there. To go anywhere, it takes a long time to get into this, especially into the city of Seattle.
You're talking like LA, California vibes.
It's up there. Yeah, I think it's in the, I don't know. They're all in the top 10, like Dallas and Seattle and LA and San Francisco. It's bad.
So how was it growing up there? Was you a happy kid?
I was like a nerd in high school and middle school. I mean, I was like a rocker kid, but I wasn't like the cool rocker kid. I was like the dorky rocker kid. And so, I was listening to like Motley Crue, and I guess this is not a national thing, or probably not, definitely not into the UK, but they would call heavy metal, anything that wasn't alternative grunge, because that's what was popular at the time. They called that butt rock. So like Van Halen, Warrant, but also like Megadeth and Anthrax, that was all called butt rock. So I was like, people would call me like a butt rocker because I wear like Metallica shirts and White Zombie, but also, like Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. So that was not necessarily the cool stuff at the time, but I was really into it. I really liked it. And it was weird growing up in Seattle during the height of grunge. And I liked grunge too. I liked Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, all that stuff. But I wasn't like as into that as I was into like metal.
So what kind of time was it you was getting into? Was it literally like around 1990 or just after?
Yeah. So I was like, when I was a kid, I was more into like MC Hammer and like Vanilla Ice and stuff. I was a kid and I was into, it's like poppy rap kind of stuff. And then I started getting into more like Public Enemy and NWA and stuff, into the harder rap. So I was always into rap. And then in 8th grade, I dated this girl. And one time we were hanging out and she's like, she only had like one CD with her. And she's like, oh, this is all I have is Skid Row, Slave to the Grind. And I was like, yeah, I don't care. I'm hanging out with a girl. I'm excited to be with a girl. So she puts that on and we're hanging out. I'm like, what is this? This stuff is like, this is good. I like this. This is crazy. I never thought I liked heavy metal, but I like this. This is really good.
And that's a heavy album, dude.
Yeah, that album really changed my life. I was like, oh, I think I like heavy metal now. And then I got into Skid Row, and then I got into Guns N' Roses and Metallica and, all that stuff from that one album. I started really getting into it and started reading Metal Edge. And I guess I just almost like totally didn't even really like rap anymore. I was just so into rock at that point.
I don't know if it's just rock music or if it's music in general. When you find it around your formative years, it just consumes you. It really does.
It's all I was interested in. It was really weird. I was just, I wore the shirts. I'd go to the concerts. Like I said, I read about it in the magazines. I watch Headbangers Ball. Like it was like my number one. And we didn't have as much content like now. There wasn't podcasts and websites that you could go to and read about. I mean, I probably would have just never left the house if that was the case. Like I get Metal Edge. And I mean, I'd read that in like a day. I'd just read the whole thing.
Especially because I only heavily got into music a few years before then. So you're talking like, what you're talking like 91, 92 kind of time.
Yeah. So 8th grade, it was 92. 91, 92, that year. Nirvana and that stuff was like, it was starting to take off right in that spring. But it was a cool time because, in my opinion, I liked how there was like all that stuff was popular at the same time for a short amount of time. It was like Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Skid Row. It was all kind of cool and popular for a very short window. It was all at the same time. I was like, that was really a great time, 91, 92.
Definitely. I mean, I always think it's kind of cool because I've always liked music, and I always say I kind of got into hard rock through 80s movie soundtracks.
Oh, which ones?
Well, the top two, without a doubt, are Top Gun and Rocky IV.
Yeah.
Best soundtracks, hands down.
Okay. Yeah, that's like a little poppier stuff. It's funny. I didn't really get into the poppier rock stuff. I heard it as a kid. I knew the songs. I liked them. But when I was in college, they had these things called Sounds of the 80s. It was like Time Life, and you could buy it. You get a CD every month. And I'd start getting those. And I was like, oh, man, I remember these songs from the 80s. These are great songs. And then I started getting way more into like pop music, too.
Yeah. Well, that's what the hard rock, which we like, is really. It's just pop music with heavier guitars, really. All the melodies and hooks are still there. It's still the same stuff.
I feel like the older I get, the more diverse my musical tastes become. Like I used to always hate country, and now recently I like country now. So it's kind of nice.
Country's kind of become the new melodic rock in a way. I don't know what it's like over there, but what we get over here, it's very melodic rock based, really. And a lot of those guys are in that scene as well. That's where all the LA rockers moved to. They all moved to Nashville.
Yeah, no, I know. We went and visited there. It's crazy. And then, yeah, there's so many people that live down there. And yeah, it's kind of like a fine line now between country and rock.
Are you a Brad Paisley fan? I love Brad Paisley's stuff.
I don't know any of the songs off the top of my head, but I bet if you played them, I'd go, oh yeah, I've heard that before.
I mean, he's a shredder. He like does these country songs and rips out a solo, and he's done Hot for Teacher.
Oh, really?
Van Halen in his live set.
That would be awesome.
The guy's great. It's awesome. So you got any brothers and sisters, or are you just an only kid?
Yeah, I got two older half brothers, two younger brothers, and I have one older sister. Yeah, I grew up. There was the four of us. My two older half brothers didn't live with us, but yeah, growing up, it was the four of us. So I was kind of the black sheep of the family. I guess I still am.
Why was the black sheep?
I don't know. Like my older sister and my oldest younger brother. I mean, they were like popular and kind of the cool kids, and played all the sports, had all the friends, went all the parties. And I was not. that category. So that's why I think I really connected with music. I go up into my room and, these bands and like Metal Edge, I mean, those were like my friends kind of in a way. Like I would just like really focus on that stuff. And those things were always there for me. So I was like really into that. And there wasn't anyone else that was really that much into that kind of stuff, into music as much. So I kind of was like on my own for a lot of it.
None of your friends shared similar tastes, or was they all into the popular stuff?
You find kids here and there that were into that stuff. But it's funny because sometimes you're just friends with a kid because they're into music, even if it's not the same bands as you. Like I'd be friends with a lot of skater kids who were into a lot of punk music, like really like obscure, like Black Flag, or not the Black Flag obscure, but some other like more obscure punk bands, but they were really into that stuff. But we'd connect because we're both passionate about music. So that's kind of cool.
So when you get into Skid Row, did you kind of track back onto the first album? And
yeah, I kind of discovered all that stuff backwards, right? So like I got Skid Row, Slave to the Grind, Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion, the Metallica Black Album. I got all those ones first, and then I went back and got their old stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, like Appetite's pretty good too, I guess, and Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets are pretty good, and yeah, obviously the first Skid Row album is amazing too. But yeah, so like that 91, 92 is like, in my opinion, it's like one of the best years or eras of rock music. Like so much stuff came out during that time.
You probably know this anyway, but Poison took Alice in Chains out on their first big tour.
Oh yeah, there's also it's funny, I hear all those stories from a lot of those bands. Like Tora was telling me like, oh yeah, like we were on the same record label as Chris Cornell. So like, one time like they wanted me to just like hang out with Chris Cornell, and I was like, that's so weird to think about those bands like, mixing. But yeah, back in the day, like I said, that year, I mean, a lot of those bands there was a lot of crossover. And then, 93, 94, it really became, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Nirvana, grunge, cool. And then everything else, like I said, butt rock or metal, different worlds. They can't mix.
You've probably heard me say it on the podcast in one or two episodes, but a quote which kind of hit home with me a while ago was somebody said, the best 2 years of any decade are the first 2 years of the following decade. And I agree with that. Like 1991, 92 were probably the best albums from all those hard rock bands were like putting out their best stuff just before everything changed. It's ever so weird.
I know. It sucks because there's so many albums that came out in that era, like 91, 92, 93, or that didn't come out, but that should have been bigger. Like there's a lot of I think Danger Danger. They had like an album that was supposed to come out.
Oh, the Cockroach album.
Yeah. And it's like there's some song. I finally heard that just like more recently.
Phenomenal, man.
There's some really good songs on there. And there's a lot of those like quote unquote hair bands that put out some of their best work in 91, 92, 93, but no one's heard it. Kind of sucks.
Where was you buying all your records from? Was you finding everything in bargain bins around that time?
That's funny that you mentioned that. Yeah, because definitely a lot of the music that I was getting into.
Or was they burning it in Seattle?
Yeah, it was not popular. So yeah, you could find some pretty good deals. But yeah, I remember going to the record stores, like Tower Records. I don't know if they had those. Do they have those in UK?
Yeah, there was a big one in London.
Oh, they did? Oh, really? That's awesome. I didn't know they were worldwide. That's cool. But yeah, there was a big Tower Records, and it had the videos and the books too. So I'd love go. That was like, you're like a kid in the candy store going to those kind of places. Or there's all sorts of different CD stores but also a big thing for me was I don't know if they had these over where you live, but the CD clubs where you'd send in and you get like 10 CDs for the price of one. And then they try to send you one every month, and then you just send it back. And so you get those 10 free CDs though. And that was like I think I'd signed up for a couple of those. Like, yeah, that's a good scam to get free music.
Did you ever buy anything based on the cover alone? Take a gamble?
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you had to do that. So like, yeah, I mean, I talk about that all the time because when you're a kid, I mean, you can read about it in a rock magazine like Rip or Metal Edge. You might see a video on Headbangers Ball, or you might hear one song on the radio. But all in all, like if you're buying a full album, you're taking a chance for the most part. I mean, you don't know what you're getting. So you might have been a fan of the band, or you might have heard that it's good. And so there was a lot of things. Like I remember Mr. Bungle. Do you remember that band? So I'd see so many rockers wearing Mr. Bungle t-shirts, and I was like, what is this? Like Mr. Bungle? I keep seeing these t-shirts, like every rocker would have them, but I don't think I'd ever heard any like thing of their music, but I knew that it was Mike Patton from Faith No More, and I love Faith No More. So I just bought the album one day, and I was like, oh, this is like some weird shit. I mean, I liked it. I think it took longer to kind of really appreciate the full thing, but at first I was just maybe like one or two songs, but then as time went on, I think I could appreciate more of it. But there was a lot of stuff like that. Like I remember I just interviewed the drummer from the Melvins, and he played on some of Nirvana's albums, and I remember he played on Incesticide. died. And I remember buying that album without hearing any of the songs, but I knew, I was like, well, I like Nirvana. Maybe this will be good. And I think I just had some money that week and that came out and I was like, I'll check it out. So I bought it. And I think that's my favorite Nirvana album.
What was the kind of like the whole vibe for you being in Seattle and that whole huge scene that came from there? Was you able to get a feel for it, or you didn't know any different kind of thing? You was getting into music, so you figured every city had that kind of thing.
I don't know how it was in other cities, but yeah, I just remember definitely a lot of kids liked Alice in Chains' Dirt. I feel like I heard that album so much. Like anytime I'd be hanging out with my friends or anybody, would go to a party or something, which didn't happen very often. Again, I didn't have a lot of friends, but if I did, like I remember hearing that album a lot, like driving through the parking lot at school and stuff. That was a really popular one. So yeah, a lot of kids are really into all that Seattle grunge, but I'm assuming that was probably throughout the country at the time. But yeah, it was weird kind of being in the heart of it. I think it's probably a little bit more concentrated there, I would think. And again, it was really weird for me to be into the butt rock at the time.
You were the rebel.
Yeah, kind of, but not like, yeah, I don't know. It was weird.
Who were your favorite crossover bands? I know you mentioned White Zombie.
I like so much different rock. I mean, we saw White Zombie in concert. We saw Anthrax. I remember going to see Ozzy, Pantera. You'd have like, if you knew somebody that was a big fan and they like, I had like the one of my friends that I had, he was really into that kind of more the heavier Panteras and stuff like that. And also those bands toured. So it was like, hey, he's like, you want to go to see Pantera? I was like, sure. And they were amazing live.
Well, Skid Row toured with Pantera, didn't they, as well?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I had to see Skid Row. They played this tiny little venue called the Moore Theater in Seattle. And I was really excited. It was like 95, I think. And they were like I said, they were one of my favorite bands, but I caught them right on the tail end. So I think that tour, that Slave to the Grind tour had ended. I didn't get to catch them on that tour. So I had to wait till the Subhuman Race. And obviously there was a lot smaller venue at that point. So, but it was really it was amazing to see them.
Yeah. I struggled with that album. I keep going back to it every few years.
Subhuman Race?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had Rachel Boland. I interviewed him, which was amazing. It was like so weird to me to interview him. I mean, it was just surreal. And he said he doesn't like it. He doesn't like that album. He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm like, what? Why not? I liked it as a kid. But he said, nah, we were kind of we knew it was over at that point. So we're like, we're doing the album, but we know like no one's going to listen to it because grunge had taken over. So
you think Slave to the Grind's a heavy album, Subhuman Race takes it to another level.
Right. I think Slave to the Grind for me is like, that's kind of the level of heaviness that I really liked the most. Like some of the other stuff gets a little too heavy for me.
It's almost like a classic heavy metal album, really.
Yeah.
When you listen to like old school Judas Priest these days, that stuff ain't heavy. It's quite melodic, really. And like Slave to the Grind was almost like a revamped version of that. Just great, massive songs, just played with great aggression.
I almost feel like there's a little bit of there's definitely some punk influence too. Like the way that it's not just, like just speed metal like Judas Priest. There's like this stop and start kind of stuff. Kind of like the Guns N' Roses kind of has that same punk influences, kind of in your face, aggressive. I don't know. I love that stuff. It just like, gets you pumped up, or at least it did for me.
Guns N' Roses was your first gig, right? With Metallica.
Yeah. Guns N' Roses and Metallica and Motorhead opening.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was pretty crazy. And I remember Motorhead, I didn't know really much about them. So I was a little kind of floored by like, wow, these guys are freaking heavy. Like I didn't know any of the songs really. So, I just kind of wasn't as into Motorhead. I heard that Faith No More had opened some of the other shows, and I was hoping it was going to be Faith No More, because that would have been, I was more into Faith No More than Motorhead. But now looking back, now I can appreciate Motorhead a lot more. I've heard more of their songs and stuff.
What do you remember about that gig? Like, was it easy to get tickets? Because that tour was huge, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I remember my buddy, I just started becoming friends with this guy. He said that he had tickets, and I didn't really know him that well. So I didn't know if he was like full of shit. I was like, oh, sure you do. But it was at this place called the Kingdom, which was huge. It's where the football and the baseball team would play in Seattle. So it's a big venue.
Outdoor or indoor?
It's indoor. It was indoor venue. And so, I mean, it's such a big venue that it would be hard to like sell it out. I think it might have been sold out, but probably wasn't that hard to get tickets because, they had the whole general admission area standing and then all the seats. So, but he actually got pretty good seats and we had a good view. And I mean, it was definitely loud. Like you just don't realize how loud concerts are until you actually go to a real concert. You're like, oh, this is loud. And I do remember, Motorhead, then Metallica. Metallica was amazing. It was when James had burned his hand. So he was singing and they had John Marshall from Metal Church playing guitar. But then at the end, James Hetfield came out and he did play guitar for the last song. So that was cool. And then I do remember there was a big break in between Metallica and Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, I was going to say, how long did Axl keep you waiting?
I do remember waiting like an hour or two, maybe at least. Could have been longer. And we didn't have cell phones or whatever, right? So we couldn't like play on our phones. And we're also like 15, so we can't get beer or anything. Thankfully, at least we had a seat, because I can't imagine being general admission having to stand for that long. That'd be a nightmare. But yeah, they came on, and it was cool. I was a big fan of both those bands, so it was pretty amazing to see them live.
Was you at school the next day?
Funny, yes, I was. Because I think originally the show was supposed to be on a Friday or Saturday, but then I think it got rescheduled because of either the riot or James Hetfield's hand or whatever. But to my parents' credit, that my dad came and picked us up at like 3 a.m. in downtown Seattle.
Wow.
Which I can't believe he let me do that, but he did. Then I, went home, went to bed at like 3:30 or something, woke up a couple hours later and went to school. The cool thing was too, and I've been trying to search for this, but I don't think I could find it. But me and my buddy were on the local news.
No way.
Yeah, so they like interviewed us, and so I don't even remember what we said, but just something we were excited for the concert. And so like I remember my friends like, "Hey, I saw you on the news." I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So
that'd be awesome to find that in the archives somewhere.
I know. I think I had it recorded on this videotape and then recorded over it or so. I wish I would have saved it. Oops.
What other bands did you get the chance to see around that time, or was it later on as you got older you got a chance to see like the LA bands?
Yeah, like in that time, I had a buddy that was more into the heavier stuff. And like I said, those bands toured and they would actually come to Seattle. So I do remember seeing Anthrax and White Zombie, Pantera, Ozzy. Yeah, I think AC/DC, they came. So we got to see that. And another buddy that was into them. So that kind of stuff. But yeah, like the Bon Jovis and the Warrants and that ship had sailed. Those bands were not coming to Seattle. Like I remember waiting, like that whole era, basically, they would never come. And then eventually, I think like 2001, there was a little bit of a resurgence of that kind of music. I think there was something called the Rock Never Stops Tour, and it was supposed to be Warrant and Vince Neil and a couple other like quote unquote hair bands, and they canceled it because they couldn't sell enough tickets to Seattle. So that sucks. So I remember one time I finally, this was like 2007 or something, I drove to Idaho from Washington to see Warrant and LA Guns and Firehouse at this random like outdoor venue concert thing that they had because they just wouldn't come to Seattle.
How was that seeing those bands? Did it hold up?
It was cool. Yeah, but it wasn't, and I think I heard you talk about this too. You never got to see Warrant with Janie Lane. So it was their other singer. It was the guy from Black and Blue.
Oh, Jamie St. James.
Yeah, it was him. They were all great. But yeah, it's cool to see that kind of stuff because that always kind of held a special place in my heart because that was kind of the first kind of music that I remember getting into as a kid. So yeah, it was cool to see that stuff. And now I've seen so many concerts living in Phoenix. And then like we drive sometimes to go see a band if it's in LA or Vegas, or we even drove to Denver to see Dangerous Toys because I was like, I really like Dangerous Toys, but they don't do a lot of shows. So if you want to see them, you got to kind of travel.
Nice. Is there any bands who you've not had the chance to see, who you got to tick off your list?
Gosh, that's a good question. I got to think. One of the big ones that I was really into right in that same time in 8th grade when I first got into music was Ugly Kid Joe. I did get a chance to interview Dave Fortman, and that was really cool. And he's a great interview. I would definitely, if you're an Ugly Kid Joe fan, check out that interview I did with him. But I have not seen them live because, again, they didn't really come to Seattle very much. And if they did, it was like a 21 and over show, and I couldn't go. And then they kind of broke up. Now they tour, but they do more like Europe and stuff. They don't come to the States as much.
I don't think I saw them right back in the day. I think I saw them. Well, I say that. We saw them with Bon Jovi in 95. So that's kind of just after they had the big hit. But then saw them with supporting Skid Row, strangely, in Nottingham.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God. What year was that? That would have been like a dream concert for me.
I'll get my years wrong, but it wasn't too long ago. It was about 5 years ago, something like that.
Oh, okay. So recently.
Yeah.
Okay. So now with Sebastian Bach.
No. Johnny Solinger was still with him.
Yeah.
I thought he was great anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, friggin' Whitfield Crane is hands down, one of the best frontmen I have ever seen.
Really? See, yeah, that's what I always thought from what I'd seen, videos of or whatever. And just, I liked that band. I don't know, something about them. They had that, again, a similar kind of aggression style, kind of punk kids
but still fun.
Yeah. Well. They had like a sense of humor too. I love like as a kid, the cartoon mascot was really a big draw to me too. I was like, oh, that's a cool like mascot. I like that.
They opened for Skid Row and they said like, oh, we're going to do a new song. And it started and Whitfield was like, right, hands in the hair and right, everybody do this. And this was a brand new song, which nobody knew. They were supporting Skid Row and he kept them doing that throughout the entire song.
That's awesome.
Respect, dude.
They have a new album coming out. I don't know when it's coming out, but he showed me the cover art for it, which I thought was, he's like, don't show this to anybody. I'm like, whoa, I get a sneak peek of the cover art of the new Ugly Kid Joe. I mean, like if I could go back in time and tell my 14-year-old self that was going to it's just mind blowing. So, I mean, I'm sure you kind of experience the same thing interviewing some of these guys. Like it's kind of like surreal sometimes.
Did your music taste change over the years, or have you always kind of constantly stayed super passionate about music and shows, or has real life got in the way at any point? I know it did for me for a few years.
Yeah, my music taste definitely changed. Like when I was a kid, I was into pop stuff, and then I got into the rap, and then I got into the heavy metal butt rock stuff. And then when I was in college, I kind of branched out and I got more into pop music a little bit. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I like some of this pop, and I still liked, the metal and stuff too. I've always still liked the heavy metal and things like that. And then, like I said, when I got just more recently, I think I'm more into like country and stuff like that. I think good music is good music. If I can find something good, I like all sorts of stuff. I like blues. I really like live music. So like if there's a band playing a cover band or a jazz or blues or something, I love that kind of stuff. Like I think it's great. But yeah, like it, sometimes it wanes. Like it goes through periods where I'm not as into music. And there's been years where I've just, I got really into sports and stuff and following football and all that stuff. So, but yeah, right now, I mean, I'm just doing so many interviews. Like I'm kind of like really into music by, having to do research and stuff and hear all about this stuff and having, doing interviews like this where we're talking music.
Where did you go to college?
I went to college, a small little school near Seattle. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours outside of Seattle, called Central Washington University. I don't know if we have really that big of a claim to fame. There was like a NFL quarterback that, I don't know if you know American football, but John Kitna went there. Not too many famous people have gone there, but I really enjoyed it. It was a small little school. I stayed there for my bachelor's and my master's. So I was there for like 7 years studying, and I got really used to living over there. It was fun. I kind of like the small town feel. I don't know if you live in a big city or a small town, but I kind of like that small town feel. Like you go out to the bars and, like every time I go out to the bars, I'd see someone I know. It was kind of cool. I like that feeling, but yeah, I had to move back eventually.
What kind of led you to move into Arizona though?
So like my brother, he went to ASU. So he came down here to go to ASU, and my parents would, come down to visit him, or I don't know if it was to drop him off, but at some point they came down and they were like, oh, this is like really not a bad place here. And oh, look at these houses are really cheap. So they ended up buying a house as kind of like a winter home or whatever. So they still kept their house in Seattle area, but they had a house down here too. So then I would come and visit. They'd bring us down for Thanksgiving and things like that. And then I started kind of falling in love. I was like, oh man, it's like really nice weather here. It's sunny and everything's so clean and there's no traffic, and it's totally different from Seattle. So I just kind of fell in love with it. And then around 2008, I just decided I'm going to go try living there. And I didn't know if I'd be there for like 6 months or I'd move back in a year. I didn't know how long I would last, but it's been 13 years and I love it.
So when did podcasting enter your life? Was there any kind of inspiration or just downtime or just something you felt like doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, I like podcasts. I mean, I like talk radio, like Howard Stern, Joe Rogan, there's tons of stuff out there. But I remember my cousin who works he's a reporter at the local news station here. He started a podcast and I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. You started, I was like, do you have to like have a bunch of professional equipment, or like, is that, you're doing that through your news station? He goes, no, I'm just doing it. It's really easy. I'm like, oh, and he kind of explained, the process for starting one. And I thought, oh, wow, that's really cool. Like, it's really easy to do that. I was like, I should start a podcast. And finally it took a while to kind of get it off the ground, but, I finally started one. I started one with my buddy first. We did that for like, I don't know, a year and a half or something. Then we talked about, okay, we're going to branch out. We're going to each do a solo show. And so we had done a couple interviews on our show. We interviewed some people and I really liked that. I was like, oh, this is fun hearing about other people's experiences. I think we interviewed like an actress and a comedian and an actor and a singer. And I was like, this is like really fun for me. I like interviewing people. And it made sense for me because I was a counselor for 17 years in the school. So
I was going to say, did you have any kind of journalism or something you could bring into it, or techniques?
Yeah. So as a counselor, you're taught these listening skills and asking questions and things, and how to do a counseling interview. But it's so different than doing like a journalistic type of interview, because, journalistic, like you're kind of more supposed to follow your curiosities. Like you're asking questions that you're curious about that you assume other people would want to know about too. But in the counselor, background, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to just let the client, talk and reflect back with them. And, you're not supposed to be nosy and that kind of thing. So, but that was like my natural instinct. I was always like, oh, I want to know about this, but I'm, not supposed to ask. So it was a lot easier for me doing these kind of interviews, just using my natural instincts, I think. So yeah, so I branched out and I did the solo show. And like I said, when I first started, I was like, oh, I'll just do this like once a week or a couple times a month. And then, like I said, I think I kind of got like addicted to it. I was like, oh, this is so fun. Like interviewing these people, like I'm fascinated to hear what they think. And then, when other people enjoy it too, that's even crazier for me, because I'm like, I'm mostly doing this for myself to like, to understand these people or hear their stories. So if other people enjoy it too, like that's amazing.
Who was the first person who agreed to do an interview with you where you thought like, holy shit, this is mad? Who you'd reached out to, or perhaps you didn't think would get back to you? Was there anybody?
Oh my God, there's been so many. Like, I mean, I feel like it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So like I think the first guy that I interviewed for my solo show was just a comedian that had come through the local comedy club. I talked to him in person about it. I go, hey man, I do a podcast. I'd love to have you on if you wanted to do it. Cause I thought he was pretty funny, and I figured, oh, he'll probably do it. He's not like, he's not too big to do podcasts. And so he was a little reluctant at first, but I got him to do it. I think it went pretty well. But then I reached out. So Mark Scott from Trickster, we had a mutual friend that I went to high school with. A friend in high school taught him karate or something. And so I think I was like his Facebook friend or something. And I just thought, well, maybe he'll do it. I don't know. Like I'll ask him. And I'd seen that he had done other podcasts and interviews. So I thought, well, I'll just reach out and see if he's interested. And he said yes. I think it took I had to like, hey, you still want to do it? Like, can you do it this? And then he's like, okay, yeah, let's do it. So then he finally agreed. And I was definitely like nervous the first time I interviewed him, because I was like, this is weird. I mean, this is a guy who I had the Trickster CDs. I was a Trickster fan.
One of my favorite bands, dude.
Yeah. And again, this was back in Seattle in the 90s. But I loved it. I thought they were so great. Very, a little poppy, but good stuff.
Hey man, Trickster were the forerunners of bringing flannel shirts into hard rock.
That's right. PJ Farley. Yeah. They joke about how they hung themselves with the flannels or whatever. But yeah, so I was nervous, and I remember doing that. And I'm thinking, oh, this was fun. This is cool. And then I sent the article to Sleaze Rocks thinking, oh, maybe they'll do a story about some of this stuff we talked about. Dude, the Sleaze Rock guy, he loved it. He did 5 articles on that interview, and I was just like blown away. I was like, what is it? Like me and Mark we're like just like baffled. We're like, I can't believe there's another article. Like every time there'd be a new one, we're like, there's another article from this interview. Like it was just, I don't know if so maybe they were big Trickster fans too, or what. Kind of blew me away that the press that I got for that first one. I mean, even seeing my name on Sleaze Rocks was weird, because I followed that site, I think since the 90s or a long time that it had been up, and I'd always like check back and see, what was going on in that kind of world. That was a way to kind of keep in touch. After Metal Edge kind of dropped off, it was like, that was kind of one of the ways to keep up with what was going on in the hair metal world was Sleaze Rocks. So it was cool to see our interview up there.
Were there any things you learned pretty fast early on about what to do, and perhaps more importantly, what not to do when it comes to interviews?
Yeah. I mean, God, yeah, there's so many. I mean, early on, I would say, gosh, that's a really, God, I'm trying to remember now, because early on, I think thing I learned right away, I think it was just like my natural instinct was to really like prepare and do research for the interviews. And I learned that the guests really like that. If you are prepared and you know about them, you know their history, you've listened to interviews, so you know questions that they're sick of asking or answering. I think that really helped. So I think I learned that pretty quick, because the guests would be like, wow, like you really did your research. And so that's kind of like an ego rub. I was like, oh, okay, like I did something good. Like, I wasn't getting that working in the schools and stuff. I wasn't getting a lot of those like attaboys. So it's kind of nice to hear that from the guests. So that was one thing I learned that was like something that I was doing right. And then in terms of things that I was doing wrong, probably just a lot of like production technical stuff, like probably add the theme song and stuff later, do a little bit of more editing and post-production, with sound things like getting the mics right and things like that. And then doing the phone calls, that's always tricky sometimes. Now we do Zoom. It's a lot easier. But in the beginning, I was doing like the phone calls with the Bluetooth and a lot of the technical types of things. But, and then as time goes on, I feel like my interview style has evolved a little bit more. And so I'm not all my research and prep work and trying to kind of be more natural sometimes and just follow like down the rabbit holes.
Yeah. You can just go turn left all of a sudden when you plan to turn right.
Yeah. Like when they bring up something, they're like, well, yeah, it's like that time that I got into a fight with David Lee Roth. You're like, well, that might not be on your list, but you're talking about a fight with David Lee Roth. like, you better follow that rabbit hole and figure out what happened there.
Your research level, like I say, it's friggin' next level, dude. I think the first interview I heard of yours was the one with Eric Turner.
Oh, God.
I remember thinking, damn, this guy's good. Like, I thought I knew a lot of warrant stuff, but there's like about 5 or 6 topics. Like, I've never heard about that before. Some of the stuff you ask is crazy. I have no idea where you find it. I think when I'm like Googling for question ideas, I do a pretty good job, but some of the stuff you come up with is like insane. You can tell from the guest response too that they're impressed.
For me, it's just like, it's natural. Like once I start getting into the interview, it's like I just snowball. Like I'll Google a few things about this person. And then and then I just go down this rabbit hole. I just like become addicted to like, okay, I got to find out more. I got to get more. And I start listening to podcasts and YouTube interviews and Googling. And I just try to find as much as it's kind of like a game. It's kind of fun for me. And especially when it's like Eric Turner of Warrant. I mean, I loved Warrant so much. They're like one of my favorite bands. So everything about them is just fascinating to me. That one was a lot of fun. And yeah, the one thing I think that we got press on that was that he had kind of auditioned for Megadeth.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I was like, crazy. I think even Eric was like, how did you know about that?
Yeah, well, because I think I heard him talking about it in an interview and I was like, what? I've never heard this. And I even told the guy who did the interview, I can't remember who it was now, but I messaged him and I was like, dude, I didn't know that thing about Megadeth. And then the guy was like, I don't remember that interview because it'd been a long time for him too. But it's cool to find those kinds of things. And now with the internet, it's like, you can find the stuff on the internet, or if it's not on the internet, now it will be because it's in a podcast. And then, if Blabbermouth picks it up or whatever.
Which is your favorite Warrant album? I got to ask.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think probably Cherry Pie. But I mean, the first 3, Dirty Rotten, Filthy Singing Rich. I mean, that's a great album. The Cherry Pie is great. I also really like the Dog Eat Dog.
I didn't like it when it came out.
You didn't?
No. You know why? I think the only reason is because I love it now. This is going to sound really, I don't know what the word is, but the image of the band was such a contrast from Cherry Pie, where every photo shoot you saw them, they were happy and all of a sudden it was just all black leather, mean and moody. Janie's got his hair pulled back in a ponytail and all this kind of thing. I was like,
right. It was a little bit. I'd be curious to know if they didn't go that route, if they stayed on the Cherry. He said, I remember in the interviews, he would say, I didn't want to make Cherry Pie 2, but I kind of wonder, what if he did? I'm just curious, like what it would have sounded like, or maybe like more of a slight departure from Cherry Pie, because I feel like the first record and Cherry Pie are pretty different. I think there's definitely a different sound on those first 2. I'd be curious if they didn't go as far as Dog Eat Dog, because some of the songs on Dog Eat Dog could have fit on Cherry Pie, a few of those songs. So what if they had done more like that?
No, it's still a great album. I grew to love it.
I do like that one though a lot though. It's great.
So you're pretty ruthless too in your interviews. You don't have any fear.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan in pushing people for like specific details as much as I want. You just kind of dive in there. Where does that come?
Do I do that? Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know I did that. Give me an example. When was I ruthless?
Even on that Paul Gargano one this morning, like he'll start talking on some Jerry Miller thing and he won't go into the specifics, and you'll push him for the specific. It's great.
Yeah, it's just like, again, I was a counselor for 17 years. So I was telling my girlfriend this the other day, like there's nothing that I could hear that's going to shock me. Like I've heard it all. I've heard, everything. I mean, you think of anything like child abuse, incest, rape, drugs, and all that kind of stuff. I've heard all those stories and I've talked to people and worked through that with them. So there's nothing that like, a guy in a rock band is going to tell me that's really going to shock me that much. So I don't feel, I guess I don't really have the fear.
Perhaps don't realize you're doing it.
So I think it's a comfort level thing. So I think for a lot of people that do this, they're just fans of the band and their background may be in engineering or probably not used to having really deep conversations with people. So it feels a little more uncomfortable. Like, and when I first started out as a counselor, that kind of stuff, definitely, it was weird to talk about that. I was like, especially with a stranger, you don't know this person, but after you've done it so long, it's just like, and a lot of people like to tell me, their deep, dark secrets. Like I think I just have that kind of personality that I'm kind of laid back and easy to talk to, I hope. And so I think a lot of people will tell me that kind of stuff. But now, I have found myself pushing a little bit more too.
I think it's great. I wish I could do it.
Yeah, I want to get the good story and I think that's the other thing is right now with the podcast, and I think I talked to you about this a little bit off air, just how there's so many podcasts podcasts popping up. I feel like every week there's some new guy in a new podcast with a guy in a black t-shirt and long hair and glasses. Like it's like almost every week there's a new one. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, so which is good because I think it pushes everyone to do their best. And so it's definitely pushing me to put out good content and try to stand out. Like last week I interviewed Junkyard, the band Junkyard, and I was their third interview. And that's insane to me. I'm like, this is a band that I liked and I think they're underrated for sure. But the fact that they have 3 interviews in a week is like, that's crazy to me. So I've got to stand. I mean, even the most diehard Junkyard fan, I don't know that they're going to listen to 3 interviews in 1 week with the band. So somehow my interviews got to stand out. So, I talked about that stuff with the singer, how he was homeless and stuff, that's a tough thing to talk. It was uncomfortable for me to talk about, but I thought, this is something that we need to bring up because it's an important part of what's going on. And he was open. He talked about another interview. So I knew he was open to talking about it. And, then sure enough, we got an article on Sleaze Rocks, and that got a lot of press for that. And I hope they're not mad about that, but I think it was like cool that we brought it, that issue. And I think it's a deeper thing about how bands are not able to survive right now during this they're struggling. Like that's a lot of working musicians are struggling. And I thought that was cool that the singer, David, was open about it and saying like, dude, I'm struggling right now because I can't tour. I can't do shows. There's a pandemic. So, yeah.
Has anybody contacted you, like, after you've done the interview, slept on it for a while, like, oh, shit, did I really say that? I best kind of nip that in the bud.
Like, they want me to cut something out?
Yeah, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, I've had, just recently that happened. I had one where somebody asked me to cut out this whole section where we talked about Marilyn Manson. And I was like, oh, yeah, we can cut that out. And then I look back on it, I was like, yeah, I probably didn't say the right. You got to be so careful. So something that's like, yeah, let's just cut that out. And I had a comedian one time talking about Louis C.K. like a couple hours later. He's like, can you take that Louis C.K. part out? He's like, I feel like that's just not good. I was like, yeah, okay. And it kind of sucks because it's like sometimes that stuff is like it's so juicy, and it's like so interesting. But I get it because like they don't want to screw up their reputations, and I totally respect that. I would never put something in there that they don't want in there. And at the same time, it's like, well, I got to hear it, so that's kind of cool.
And finally, who's on your hit list for dream interviews?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Skid Row, that was like one of my first bands that I really got into. So definitely Sebastian Bach. I mean, I've interviewed Rachel, and that was amazing. He's super cool. And he's the guy that pretty much the architect of most of those songs that wrote them and stuff. So that's a huge piece. But I mean, Sebastian Bach, I mean, he sang them and
You've met Sebastian before though, right?
I've met him a couple times. Yeah. He was really nice to me, really cool. And just I think he would be such a good interview too. I think he's just such a character, and I'm such a fan. I feel like we'd have a good chemistry. I think it would be a good interview. And then, but by ultimate would be, besides Sebastian, would be Axl Rose. I think that would be amazing. And he never does interviews, but I think, like you said, like I could be kind of ruthless, but I think that could work well with him because, like my counseling background, I mean, I think you got to be careful with a guy like that because you don't want to piss him off, but I think I could do it. I don't know. I think it'd be a really good interview. It would definitely be a big one. That's for sure.
Block out 2 weeks before for all your research.
Oh, I would. Yeah.
You would go down.
I would do like a month of research. And I mean, a lot of it I already know because I already just do the research. He's just fascinating. I don't know if you saw the latest thing on the Reels channel. What is it? Breaking the Band, I think, about Axl Rose. It was so good. You should check that out because you kind of find out what was going on during that time where he was kind of like just not doing anything.
Well, thank you for this, dude. Congratulations on smashing 100 episodes.
Yeah, thanks for having this. Is amazing. This is fun. Like, cool to actually talk to you in sort of real life. I mean, we message on the internet and stuff, and you comment on my stuff. I comment on yours, but it's cool to actually see your face and everything. It's very cool.
Well, you enjoy the rest of your day. It's been great.
All right,
to
you too.
you.
Thanks, man.
All right, man.
Take it easy.
I'll speak to you soon. All righty.
Bye-bye.
Many thanks to my friend Chuck Shute for checking in with me from Arizona, USA, and it really was a lot of fun to chat after listening to his shows for such a long time. His no-holds-barred approach when talking to guests really is inspiring, so if you enjoyed our talk, be sure to find the Chuck Shute Podcast wherever you listen to your shows. The guy is everywhere. From me, it means a lot that you continue to listen and support this show. Don't forget, we now have our own dedicated website at simply stvpod.com, where you can listen to all earlier episodes, check out some straight-to-video music and videos, and there's also a merch store where you can pick up the latest straight-to-video t-shirt. If you would like to support the show that little bit more, then I've set up a support page where you can buy me a coffee. Simply click on the Buy Me a Coffee button and you can send a small donation of your choice, which goes towards the growing of the show and continuing to improve on equipment to help make it even better for you, the listener. Log on to stvpod.com for all the info. Really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I can tell you the next few shows are going to be through the roof with the chats I've got in the bag, so make sure to like, follow and share wherever you listen so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks so much, you guys are the best, and I look forward to talking to you all again real soon.